Hi, welcome to Spotlight on the Arts. I'm Karen Stevens, and I'm your host for this evening's show. Before we introduce our guest, let's meet our panel. Ms. Iris Acker, actress, author, and producer of Spotlight on the Arts. Mr. Michael McKeever, he's a playwright, he's a graphic artist, and he's also an actor. And Mr. Bill Hirschman, who is a theater journalist and the chief critic at FloridaTheaterOnStage.com. Now, our guest this evening is Mr. John Lariviere, who is a professional vocalist and vocal instructor. Hello, John, how are you?
I am well, thank you. And before we start, I want to say I'm a fan of everyone here, so it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. You're starting off good.
We'll pay you later.
So tell us a little bit about what you do in South Florida. You're basically based in South Florida. You've been here for a long time as a performer and as a vocal instructor. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about that.
So actually, before I talk about what I do, I wanted to talk about the focus of, well, what I think is important to talk about this evening is the difference between a vocal instructor, vocal coach, voice teacher, because I think that there are a lot of young professionals in South Florida that are looking to improve themselves, and they don't necessarily know the difference between any of those terms, and then they turn to the wrong people to work on what they're trying to improve. And as with anything, it helps to be an informed consumer. So I have to say it's divided into three categories. There's voice teachers, vocal coaches, and accompanists. And an accompanist, of course, is a pianist who has special skills. I like to call them psychic pianists because they're expected to play and yet somehow magically sense whatever the singer wants them to do with the music. And of course, we all know how valuable a good audition accompanist is.
Yes.
You have a few seconds to impart your wishes to this pianist who has to then determine whether they're leading you or following you. And but as someone that you would turn to for a voice lesson, which a lot of people do, a pianist / accompanist is someone that you would expect to, of course, play very, very well and help you practice your audition piece or your performance piece and mark your music for cuts for auditions. And there are a lot of people that go to accompanists to rehearse their audition pieces so that when they go into a room that they don't have that nervousness and they know exactly what to expect. And then vocal coaches are someone that you would go to help you select your repertoire and your cuts, and they would help you with breathing and phrasing and style and hopefully acting so that you're going in as a package. And then the last category is the voice teacher, and voice teachers are really technicians, so they should be knowledgeable about vocal pedagogy, how the voice actually works from a biology standpoint, from a physics standpoint, and then they're the person that would help you work on placement and stamina and your range and fluidity and fix any vocal problems that you have. And so people need to know which one to go to. It's kind of like the difference between an ophthalmologist and an optometrist and an optician.
Which one are you?
I'm an optician. No, I'm a voice teacher because I went to college at Bowling Green State University in Ohio, and so we were really trained in vocal pedagogy. But I have learned to be a vocal coach because a voice teacher who doesn't teach those other things, that doesn't help someone prepare for auditions, is kind of a one-sided thing. And you can get that in college where people are studying voice from an operatic standpoint. And it can be a little lopsided because a lot of voice teachers in those places don't play piano at all. So then you're hiring a separate pianist to come in, and you could spend the whole hour just doing vocal exercises.
Would you define pedagogy?
Pedagogy is the function of how a voice works. So it's about the technique and everything behind it, so that it's a study of the physics behind voice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
Now, do you also accompany your students?
I am not a great accompanist, which is why I am not an accompanist or a real vocal coach full out. So I admit I teach students piano, but I really kind of top out at middle school level. And so I don't like to misrepresent my skills. Don't come to me if you want me to play something really hard.
Do you teach audition techniques?
I do teach audition techniques, which...
Share one with us.
I think that part of the audition technique. In South Florida, this becomes so hard because, like, you know how we all know each other? That happens for a lot of people. You walk into the room and you think, all right, I'm going to walk in and clearly take my space, wait till people have acknowledged me by looking up from their papers, and then say, hello, my name is, and I will be performing, and then nod to your pianist and begin your piece, and then at the end say, thank you. However, that all gets lost when you walk in and you're like, how are you doing? It's been so good. Haven't seen you. And then people like are talking and they're asking how you are, and you get up there and you've lost that
your
little
energy is totally scattered.
Right.
Yes.
So when I'm
Been
teaching
there.
people, I give them those basics, and of course really focus on them matching the right style of what they're preparing for the show at hand. Because I think people have a couple of songs that they do all the time that may not have anything to do with the musical they're going in for. Yeah.
Is that what you do?
Well, yeah, you know, if you wanna sing well, so you wanna sing something that you do well, you know, and yeah, a lot of times it has nothing to do with the show that you're auditioning.
You mentioned the word style. When you say style, each person has their own style, or the style of the show they're going to be auditioning for? Define style.
So, of course, everyone does have their own style, but when it comes to style of the show, there are pieces like Rodgers and Hammerstein and Lerner and Loewe is a very classic musical theater style that is derived almost from operetta. When you think of singers like John Raitt and, of course, the late Barbara Cook, who just passed away, and their style and how that was framed so perfectly. And then we have more contemporary things like Grease, and then rock and roll like Rent, and then we have like the hard edge sounds of something like Hedwig and the Angry Inch, and now there's a real tendency on Broadway for things to be very contemporary, like Dear Evan Hansen and shows like that, where the voice is a cross between Broadway and pop, and that's really the current trend. Yeah.
Do you try to direct your students into which style their voice best suits?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a combination of maximizing what you're already really good at to make you marketable, and then improving on the areas in which you wish to expand so that you're not limited. Because I hate to have someone say, there's 10 auditions and I can only go to 2 of them because I can't sing like that. So part of going to a voice teacher is being able to say, I can sing like all of that as long as I know which song to do and how to prepare for it.
So, for civilians who really don't, who sit in the audience and watch this, what would a normal session with you be? I mean, walk us through one of those hours in the next
Well, first there's a margarita.
60 seconds.
So normal lessons are an hour, although if it's someone who's like under 7, because I sometimes get children, then it's only half an hour because their attention span is about 20-25 minutes. Although there are some actors who only have an attention span.
I know some that have 10.
And I honestly spend at least 40% of the lesson on just vocalizing and setting up what we're going to do. So then the vocalization should match the needs of the piece that we are learning, and it should be a duplication. So the same, if we're working on increasing your range, if you, Iris, wanted to sing higher notes, then I'm picking a piece that has higher notes, and of course I'm going to prep you for it. It's like stretching out a muscle to do what you wanted to do, and so everything should match. And for some people, incorporated in that time is going to be just a little bit of sight reading, because so many musical theater performers don't sight read, and that can interfere with your ability to quickly learn an ensemble part if you're in an ensemble where you're having to learn harmonies, or apply for some jobs where they actually hand you sheet music at
That's
the
interesting,
audition.
because you mentioned Barbara Cook, and she was not shy about it at all.
Right.
Barbara Cook, Mandy Patinkin, Carol Burnett, the list goes on, and local people who we won't embarrass, but are very active, none of them can really sight read.
I know.
It just takes your breath away.
It's an amazing gift, and that includes Judy Garland didn't sight read, and Frank Sinatra did not read music. He recorded 950 songs and did not read music.
Wow.
Yeah, John, I know you as this fabulous performer and musical theater actor. How does one who is a performer segue where they keep that career going and at the same time start working as a vocal coach?
I think that there are wonderful. that really depends on your personal goals. And I'll speak from my own experience, and that is that I had gone from, oh my gosh, this really goes back. I went from working all the time. I was working 11 and a half months on stage until 9/11 happened, and then a bunch of theaters closed, and the show I was in closed 6 weeks early, and I started teaching at a local private school full-time. And so then I had a yen to continue performing, and that's when I started doing cabaret work, and then I was teaching. So I think that what you are good at is something that we, of course, want to share, just like you get on stage and you share your talents. And so it's just sharing your talent on a one-on-one basis, whether or not you are coaching someone in acting or whether you're coaching someone in singing or dance. So I believe it's based on your reputation and then finding a few good matches originally that are people that you feel that you can honestly impact, and going from there to try to build a little studio of your own, if that's possible. I don't mean a brick and mortar studio, but a little gathering of people. And not every gifted performer or teacher matches perfectly with a student, because you have to kind of speak the same language. Words have to mean the same thing. It's a combination of technique and imagery for a lot of it. And so you can have a wonderful singer and a great, eager student, and they just don't match completely. So sometimes it's trial and error to find the right fit.
As a performer, you do cabaret, you do musical theater.
Right.
Do you expect your students to do as you do, to perform as you do? Is it a matter, again, of, well, I did this role, you would expect them to do it as you do? Am I getting that across?
Yeah. I expect them to maximize, when they tell me what they want, it's my job to help them get there. So what I want isn't what they want. I just want them to succeed at what their wishes are. And I don't attempt to create them in my image, but maximize their image of themselves. And I think that the one thing that I emphasize that a lot of students probably don't like is when I say, you are great at singing R&B, but can we please get you to sing in this style, so that when you go out in the world, if you want to make money singing, when you're not doing your main thing, when you're not getting that R&B job, then maybe you can take a church gig, maybe you can take a Christmas caroling job, and still make money singing. Because the alternative is you can still make money doing something else, like temping or being a waiter, but it's more rewarding to earn that money when you're doing what you were born to do, right?
Is there a different technique, or do you teach a different technique for stage singers as opposed to studio artists?
Absolutely. It's a good question, because studio artists sing with a known, they know that there is filters, and they know that there is a different sort of resonance in the studio than there is in a live hall. So sometimes taking someone, and I'll use me as an example when I've done some recording stuff, and because I kind of sing loud, so I have to pull back my sound. The bad part about studio learning that way, starting that way, and not knowing the difference is that they're really dependent on a microphone for their volume rather than their own support. And then putting them into a live performance space can be challenging, because they might have a lovely voice that just doesn't reach the back row. And this sort of microphone is not the same as this sort of microphone with studio assistance. Mm-hmm. And you should not expect your sound man in a musical, in a stage, to be filtering you and pitch correcting you, because that's not their job.
But it would make my life so much easier if it was. I'm just saying.
Well, are there 2 or 3 things mistakes or misunderstandings that people bring into you that you go, okay, we need to, these are the things that I see over and over again that I teach my students, that you go, oh my God. What do you see all the time that you need to correct or you want to correct?
I see a lot of people that are, sounds like a criticism of parents, but it's not meant to be that way. It's just that parents want what their children want, and so frequently they'll have someone who is they've been watching American Idol, America's Got Talent, and they see it. So it's a very presentational, and I call it park and bark, where they just stand and they sing as loudly as they can with their eyes closed, and they belt, and it doesn't have any dynamics, there's no softs, so there's no emotion behind it, and it doesn't have any meaning in terms of the fact they're not paying attention to the lyrics. It's just vocal showing off to some extent. And so a lot of people come with that in mind, and they just want to be famous or star instantly. They don't want to study voice. Does that make sense?
Perfect.
They want the end result of the recognition without the study. It's like, I guess, a visual artist would be the same. I assume that, I'm not a visual artist, but I assume that some people paint for the joy of the art and painting rather than, I'm going to sell this. And so people misunderstand, and they also expect immediate results. Like, I had someone come in, and after one lesson, the parent said, so what do you think? Are they going to be on Broadway? They were 7. And coming on Broadway, and I've had an adult have one lesson and say, okay, so I'm done. Meaning, like, they had a lesson, they had a voice lesson, that's all they needed for the rest of their life because they took a lesson.
Wow.
And it's like this. If you were born with natural athletic ability in basketball, you would have to determine, do I just want to be the best player on the street? Do I want to play in high school? Do I want a scholarship to college? Do I want to play professionally? And then you study and work on that craft depending on what you want to do with it. And it's the same thing.
You know about Barbara
Same thing
Streisand,
for
who never
voice.
took a class,
Right?
and they say, they can, allude to that. Well, look at Barbara Streisand, she never studied.
Yeah, but how many
Absolutely.
Barbara Streisands are there out there?
They each think one of their child is without a doubt.
That's true.
That's my little
Very
hobby.
Are there any special skills you've developed over the years that you impart to your students that have made you a better vocalist?
I think that I am very much about placement, and people mistake that if they're awake and they're speaking, that their placement is correct, and your speaking placement is not the same as your singing placement. And so I feel, this is going to sound so odd, but I feel as though from teaching different students, and especially when I taught at the private school that I mentioned, there were many students that were from other countries because they had a boarding school program. And so teaching them to sing without an accent really helped me focus on everything that happens in your mouth, because we're very naive about what our teeth and tongue and lips are doing and the shape that we make, how much that affects what comes out. And I would not have known that, I think, and because English is my first language. And so, although I don't always speak it well, but teaching them was a great gift to me because I learned so much from them as they mastered singing without an accent.
Yes, because when you speak a different language, your tongue placement is totally different. Where it lands in the roof of your mouth, your teeth and all that stuff. So,
And even regionally within the United States with certain dialects.
I was just going to say,
there's
same
differences.
thing with accents, with different accents, speaking English with a French accent or an English accent.
Oui.
Yeah. Well, isn't it a matter of singing the lyrics? If you sing the lyrics, then you can do the accent if you're doing the accent to begin with, to sing with it. I'm a big one on singing the lyrics. I find too many, you saying American, they don't. They sing the notes, they don't sing the lyrics.
And one of my favorite composers is Johnny Mercer, who has astounding lyrics if you look at them. And even, I know that people by modern standards think of Rodgers and Hammerstein and Rodgers and Hart as being very old-fashioned, but some of their lyrics are beautiful. And if you just get inside of them, then it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a certain character for that moment. You just have to be the song. I know that sounds kind of corny, but
I think it
it's
sounds lovely. I think
interpreting.
it
you
sounds
just have to
great.
be the song.
Yeah, interpreting the.
That's the kind of thing
song,
that Barbara
right?
Cook was so good at, was
Absolutely.
she would submerge herself, both when she was a young ingenue, but later when she became a cabaret performer.
Very
That
true.
was exactly what she did, is she would get deep inside the song and she would find the character in it, and she would be telling stories while she was
so
telling the
important.
lyrics.
But I
So
suspect that's what the
important.
great singers do.
Yeah.
They
do too.
just don't sing songs. They live in the song. They perform
Yeah.
the songs from inside.
Yeah.
I think that when I sing correctly, that's, I think, what happens is that the technique all goes away, and you are just the lyric for those few moments, just the lyric. And you're right about Barbara Cook. later in life, I remember one of my favorite recordings of her is Follies in Concert with her doing
Yes.
In Buddy's Eyes.
Buddy's eyes.
I can't explain it. I mean, it was later in her career, so her voice still beautiful, but not like when she did Candide. But it's just perfection, just clear, and she's only in that lyric. Yeah. And I think that understandably, directors and I'll just limit that to directors. Directors, when they see an actor perform, are looking for that when they audition, because singing beautifully doesn't mean that you take direction, and so one would assume that if someone comes to you and has interpreted the lyric, that they at least understand the concept behind receiving a direction and they've gone somewhere with it. And I would rather have someone come and sing nicely, but really sing the meaning, than someone just sing beautifully. Another example would be Bernadette Peters, who doesn't technically have a beautiful voice, but man, does she sings her lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, she wears that black strapless dress and she cries.
I love that. You know, it's also wonderful. Stutterers do not stutter when they sing. I found this out when I taught many years ago with a young lady, and making the transition from to stop stuttering by singing. And have you had anybody come to you for that?
Yes.
Not enough people teach that if they want to stop stuttering and they're willing to learn to sing, that they'll lose this stutter.
I have. There's some things that can be addressed through vocal training, and I'm not going to claim to be a vocal therapist, because that's, again, another category. But
I did it by accident.
But
I had no idea what I was doing.
But you're absolutely right, because when you speak, your vocal cords are held in proximity, and when you speak, you're tapping them, and when you sing, you're compressing the bottom of the cords. And so your vocal cords are held in proximity. And so the way that you prevent stuttering is to train someone to use their muscles as if they were singing, so they're compressing and holding in proximity, rather than stop, start, stop, start, stop, start. Because every time they stop and start, it encourages that stutter to happen. And we all know Diane Rehm?
Mm-hmm.
Diane Rehm. So she has, I believe the term is vocal dysphagia. And so that's treated, this will make sense because of what I just said. She treats it as other people do with shots of Botox, because what she's then doing is preventing the muscle from continuing to do this, so that it helps her speech pattern be more smooth.
What I'm always curious about, and you would be probably well versed in this, is, I hate to be obsessed with Barbara Cook, but she was singing into her 80s.
Yes, she was.
And there are a lot of cabaret singers, women cabaret singers in particular, who are performing late in life. How do they manage to, obviously their voice isn't going to be what it was in their 30s,
Right.
but how do, as I get older, how do they keep that ability to sing that well, not just to interpret, but from a technical standpoint? Is there something going on physically that they do?
Some people are going to be just inherently able to sing longer because of their bodies and vocal health that is part of their genetic makeup. And then some of it is environmental, because of the amount of stress, and for women, how much of an effect menopause has had on them. And for example, ladies, I don't know if you knew this, but like some female opera singers will actually contract to not sing when they're having their period, because estrogen wreaks havoc with their stamina and their ability.
Oh,
it
I knew
also
that,
affects
yes.
water retention, so it affects how hydrated their vocal cords remain. So they can say, I'm not singing during this time period. Because if you think about it, they're like vocal athletes, and so they're just not able to perform at the top of their game. And opera can be really cruel. Miss a note and they'll boo you, doesn't matter how famous you are. So when that applies to people like Barbara and other people, when you think, I mean, Barbara was not like a heavy partier, right?
Right.
So I don't think that she had like cigarettes and alcohol contributing to her vocal aging, and she was a coloratura soprano and then a lyric. So by the end of her career, she was still a lyric, but she was more of a second soprano. Moved a couple of her keys down, but still sounded great.
And it's like a muscle that you use. I mean, you continue vocalizing, that muscle stays primed over the years, right? Like an athlete.
Exactly.
Right? So.
But you know, when you do cabaret work, you pick the songs,
And your keys.
and so you sing what you sing best.
That's right.
It's as simple as
I
that.
had a dear friend who had passed away, and she actually had started off as an opera singer and with New York City opera, and by the end of her career, because she was someone who was affected by just some health issues, and by the end, she was singing actually in my range, but she was doing all of all of those like ragtime piano stuff and belting out tunes in a completely different style. But she adapted her style and had a living based on the changes that she was
How
going
about
through.
that?
Yeah.
You're a member of, and in this real quick because we have to wrap out, but you're a member of several vocal teachers and associations. Do you have to apply to that, or are you nominated? How do you become members?
The Vocal Teachers Associations I belong to, like the National Association for Teachers of Singing, are ones that you apply to, and it's based on your educational background, and you let them know what you're doing so that they are not just randomly taking anyone, because you then become part of a library of teachers that are a resource for people. So if you were to be moving to a new area and you wanted to take voice lessons, you could go to sites like that and type in and say, who is in my area? And then you would look up the person's resume and see if they match your needs. And yeah, I belong to, I think, four or five of those.
Yeah, this has been very illuminating.
absolutely.
It's been fun.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things that I knew, but you've also taught us some things today. And I think I need to talk to you after the show. But we want to thank you for joining us.
Thank
We
you.
want to thank our audience for joining us tonight. Thank our panel. We want to encourage you to visit the theater, go to the theater, and if you'd like to know what's going on in the South Florida Theater, please visit floridatheateronstage.com. Again, our guest, John Lariviere. I love that name, Lariviere.
Website, contact.
Yes, your
Oh, I
website
have
is
a website,
this.
which is my name, John, JohnLariviere.net, and it has all kinds of information about performing and my teaching background and lessons and all of that stuff. And you can see me sing on there if you want to even.
Yes. But thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week on Spotlight on the Arts.